Hello, so in this video, I want to just give a little bit of a recap on averages, okay, and the different types of averages that we can have and why we may use them. So, first of all, what is an average? Well, let's suppose I have a data set of, 200 numbers, all right, sitting in front of me. Before I do anything, statisticians in general, they just want to get a feel for that data. And one of those ways they can get a feel for that data is by saying, right, I've got 200 numbers sitting in front of me, a data set of 200 numbers. Can you just give me one number that best represents that data? And that's all an average is. It just simply looks at the data and says, right, choose a spokes number that best represents that data. And that is an average. And there's three different types of averages that we can have. So let's suppose we have a data set of four numbers. Let's suppose we have 1, 3, 3, and 5. So these are my four numbers in my data set. Well, give me a number that best represents that data. Well, just looking at it, can you see that 3 would be a pretty good number to represent that data because that's the most common number. So if something's common, then that's a pretty good indication that, that's a pretty good description of data. And we give that a special name of mode. So a mode is just literally the number that comes up the most common. Okay, so just looking at the data, which comes up the most common, because if something comes up common, it means it's a value that comes up a lot. So that's a pretty good representation of the data. Okay, incidentally, if this data was 1, 1, 3, 3, 5, then I'd have two modes, wouldn't I? I'd have 1 and I'd have 3 as the mode. So, I can absolutely have two modes, I can have 3 modes, I can have 4 modes. It's just a number that comes up a lot, all right? And actually that might be a reason why it's not necessarily a good reason. It's not necessarily a good average. It can be a good average, but mode is not necessarily the best average because you can have, remember I'm just looking for one number, but if you have a number that comes up, so that example here, I've got 1 comes up and 3 comes up, so I've got 2 numbers, not just 1, and I'm just looking for one number. Well, another type of data, another type of average that I can take is just simply by saying, so come back to my original numbers, it's just simply by saying, right, let me look at the highest value and let me look at the lowest value and plot that on a number line. So if I plot this on a number line, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I plot the highest value on a number line, so here's 5 and here's 1, and this is the lowest value on the number line, so this is 1. Okay. Now imagine you're selling a car. All right, and you want £6,000. You want £6,000 for your car. Then somebody comes along and says, I want to buy your car, but not for £6,000. I'm going to offer you £5,000. Well, negotiations occur. And what you're probably going to do is say, right, let's come to a compromise on the price. You want to pay me £5,000. I want £6,000. Let's meet in the middle. So in other words, at £5,500. All right, and that's exactly the same principle which I'm trying to describe here. So I've got the lowest value, of 1, I've got the highest value of 5. Let's say, right, let's come to a compromise. Let's meet down the middle. So in other words, let's meet at 3. Okay, and that's my next average. And that's the type of average called the median. Now, median is nice and easy to remember because it sounds like the medium. So middle value. It's a middle value. Okay. So the next way that I can think about this data is by thinking about it as a series of jumps. Okay, so let's say, for example, that the 1, I start at 0, okay, and I make a jump of 1. So the 1 just means that I make a jump of 1. Okay, this 3 just means that I make another jump and I just make a jump of 3. Okay, this next 3 just means that from where I am now, I just make another jump of 3. Okay, and this 5 just means that I make a jump of 5. All right, so in other words, I started at 0. I ended up at 12, and I got from 0 to 12 in 4 jumps, because I have 4 numbers there. So I got to 12 by making 4 jumps. Well, what if I knew nothing about that data? What if I knew nothing about the size of the jumps which I make? Because obviously I make different size jumps. So what if I just make the same size jump each time? Because at the moment I'm making a jump of 1, then a jump of 3, then a jump of 3, then a jump of 5. What if I didn't make different size jumps and I just made the same jump size each time? Well, I started at 12, Okay, I made 4 jumps. So in other words, I'm saying, right, I want to split that 12 up into 4 equal sized jumps. Now, fairly obviously, that's going to be 3. Okay, so I'm going to make 4 jumps of 3 each time. So this comes out as 3. And that's my last type of average. And actually, it's the average which is used most common. It's called the mean. And it's worked out by just adding all of my numbers up and then divided by the number which I've got. Okay, and that's another way of working out an average. So it's looking more, it's actually the one which is used the most because, you know, as we discussed, mode is okay, but you can have not just one number that comes out, but lots of different numbers. The median is actually pretty okay. It's just looking at the middle value though. And, you know, I mean, the mode, for example, may not necessarily, you know, be the middle value, whereas the mean gives a much better representation of, it looks at the data overall rather than just the middle value or the data that comes up just once. The mean actually looks at all the data rather than just the middle value or the data which comes up most common. Because in good data, if we've got enough data, if we've got a data of, I don't know, about 1,000, you know, data entries, 1,000 elements, then the mode, the median and the mean should come out as the same value. Okay, and this corresponds to something called the normal curve, okay, which is basically everything, you know, should basically follow the normal curve. Everything that has a probability of happening, a likelihood of happening, should follow, if we've got enough data entries, the normal curve. And the mean, the median, the mode should be exactly there, which is, as you can see, is in the middle. It's the most common value because it's the highest, and it also works out as the mean as well. But don't worry about that too much. So next thing I want to do is just talk about how we can actually work things out. So work these values out. Now the mode, there's no formula to work out the mode. It is just literally looking at which value comes up the most common. Now the easiest way to deal with the data is just by putting it in order. So let's say you have a data that looks like this. Okay, well, it makes sense to put it in some kind of order. So let's put it in order of size. So let's say we have, actually I'm just going to stick an extra 3 on the front. Okay, stick it in order of size. So 3, 3, then we got we've got 1 first, then a 3, 3, then a 4, then a 6, then a 7, then a 9. Okay, so we put it in order of size, so we can now get rid of all this. Okay, and then we can go about performing the mode. Well, fairly obviously you can see that the value that comes up most often is that one there. All right, so 3 is the mode in that example. Okay, how do we work out the median? Well, the median is the value that lies exactly in the middle. So in this case, I've got data of how many entries? I've got 7 entries in total. There's a couple of ways you can work it out. You can either just divide that 7 by 2, which comes out as 3.5, which means that you're looking at the 3.5 value, if you like. If it's, I mean, this is an odd. It comes out as an odd number, so you round up to get to the 4th number. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4th element, that one there. So that's the median. Or the one which I actually like to use, which works every single time, is just by using n plus 1 over 2. The reason why n over 2 doesn't work, if you've got lots of entries, it's fine. But if you've got fewer entries, you've got to think, right, is it even, is it odd? It's not necessarily the same. So the best one to use is the n plus 1 over 2. Okay, which is using exactly the same principle, just add 1 to it, then divide it by 2. So you add 1, so I've got 7 entries, add 1 to it, so it becomes 8 entries, divided by 2, so I'm looking at the 4th entry, which is the one which I should expect. Okay, so I'm just looking at the value which lies down the middle. And then the mean is nice and easy, you just add them all up, so add them all up, so the sum of all the values which I have, so let's say all these values, you know, I call this one x1, this one x2, x3, etc., and so on and so on and so on. I just add all my values up, then I divide by the number which I have. Which in this case is 7. Okay, so I add them all up, it's 33. Add them all up, it's 33. Divide by the number which I've got, which is 7. 33 over 7 is, what's that? It's 4 and 5/7. Okay, 4 and 5/7. But, you know,